Watch out, here I come.
Welcome to the Lunch Hour with Mr. Credit.
Ooh, hot.
Oh, yeah, that's hot. That is hot.
And today, it's Turnaround Tuesdays.
Let the games begin! Hey-o!
And today, we're teaching you how to point your financial life in the right direction.
Gee, I sure hope there's a happy ending. I love a happy ending.
And now, the Lunch Hour with Mr. Credit on ESPN Radio 1700.
Welcome to another Turnaround Tuesday. My name is Dan Osgood, sitting in the hot seat today for Mr. Credit, filling in, hoping to just do an adequate job filling his large shoes. Today is Turnaround Tuesday, as I mentioned, where we are going to guarantee to make you smarter than everyone else and hopefully provide very good, useful information. I feel I've got a great information-packed show today. A little bit later today, Jared Kaza will be joining us to provide his insights into estate planning and helping you make the right decisions so that you can control what happens in your life with your finances. Taking a quick look at the markets today, overall, kind of a flat day. The Dow's up just a little bit. NASDAQ is down just slightly, and as is the S&P. Yesterday, we went back to intraday highs for all-time. The Dow, once again, it backed off a little bit to where it wasn't at the absolute all-time high, but was still over 17,000 again. We've brought this up a number of times. Just exercise caution. As you hear these big, sensationalized, rah-rah stories about the markets at all-time highs, if anything, that should be more of a warning sign than a, hey, look, we're going to the moon. I need to put all my money in there. And I'm not saying it's not a good time to put money in the market. I'm just saying exercise caution. Don't be foolish with your money and do things with a specific plan for specific goals so that you know if the market does decide to correct from this point, it doesn't negatively impact you as much as it may by going with blind, excited exuberance just because people are talking about all-time highs. Here we go again, rah, we're going to the moon. Because typically, if you look at the history of the market, what goes up must come down at some point. And when that happens, it could be very difficult. Interesting story came out from yesterday's news. Citigroup announced their earnings. And also there was news of them reaching a $7 billion mortgage settlement with the court system and our U.S. government, meaning they are responsible for basically the claim is they defrauded clients and misled them, and so that they're responsible now for $7 billion. I know we've talked about this numerous times in the past. This brings up something that I've been really frustrated by. Our government now, they got J.P. Morgan for $13 billion just at the end of last year. Now they've got Citigroup paying $7 billion, which I'm guessing they're going to go look next at Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and just keep going down the checklist because these companies are putting the money forward just to be done with this. This tells me Citigroup made much, much more than $7 billion through the whole mortgage issue, which led to the financial meltdown that we had in 2008 and early 2009. I'm wondering when these lawmakers who are forcing these companies to pay are going to turn the microscope back on themselves. This is one of the frustrating parts to me. Our government leaders, who you can make a pretty strong case that they are as responsible as anyone, if not the most responsible, for enabling this situation to have occurred, which caused the financial meltdown. But you will never once hear a senator or a congressman say, we take the blame, it was our fault, we should have actually paid attention to what was going on and not worried about who was padding our pocketbooks and in funding our next campaign or funding our ongoing campaign so we can maintain this office and continue to get all the perks of being a government official. I would like someone to turn around and say, okay, it's your turn. Where are you going to pay? The problem with that is if they had to pay, that means it's coming out of the taxpayers' dollars once again. So it is a catch-22, but I would like the microscope to turn the spotlight to shine on the people that are truly responsible for these events. And let's not have these banks continuously just do the wrong thing, but pay the right people and get away with it until they have to write a check. They write the check, and it's just a small fraction of what they actually made over it. So these companies are learning, we're going to do whatever we want. When we get penalized, we're going to have to pay a tenth of what we made, so we're making so much money, it really doesn't matter. So I try not to get on a soapbox too much, but this is really frustrating, really annoying, and I'm pretty well tired of it at this point. I know Derek has mentioned the same thing a time or two, and I think we share the belief that these problems stem from the top. On a more uplifting note here, saw an article in Yahoo Finance just yesterday, and this is actually nice to see. It's a little bit typical politicians spinning information and only taking snippets of information so that they look better than they truly are. But there is actually some factual data here, which is good economic news. And the title of the article was, Obama finally has some good economic news to deliver. And so there's 7 claims that are being made right now, and of course they're not 100% true, but it is good signs. Number one is our businesses have now created nearly 10 million new jobs over the past 52 months. And that is true, but why are they using the 52-month cutoff? And this is where the games begin, because that starts to count as at the low point for employment in early 2010, making the gain since the bottom as large as possible. But if you start going back to when Obama first took office, then you see businesses have really only created 4.8 million, so less than half of what they're claiming. But still, it's a good sign. We look at the most recent jobs reports, and they created more jobs than they have in many, many years. So it is a positive pace. On average, we've been adding about 231,000 new jobs each month. We do talk about the jobs reports and how they are a little bit skewed in the fact that people falling off the rolls don't get counted. People that are underemployed are counted as full-time employed. And underemployed means if you were earning a wage of $100,000 and now maybe you can only find a job paying $50,000, your life is changing very significantly. You're not fully employed up to your potential, but you do have a job, so that's better than being completely out of work. The next point, manufacturing is adding more jobs than at any time since the 1990s. And this uptick in hiring, Mr. Obama likes to talk about, it's concealing a broader trend line that's much more discouraging. Manufacturing employment was steady in the 90s, but began to fall like a stone starting around 2000. Basically, the overall number of manufacturing jobs remains at about 1.9 million less than the tally right before the recession, and 5.5 million jobs below the peak in 1998. So manufacturing, it's in a tough time. It's right in the middle of a transition towards automated and really tech-driven production, which means there are less manufacturing jobs going to be available moving forward. So that is part of the untruth there. The next point is housing is rebounding. True, housing is rebounding, but it still has a real long way to go. On average, and of course we can kind of carve San Diego out of the real picture because it's a different market than the rest of the country, but home prices on average have regained less than half the value lost during the housing bust. And that, again, is across the entire country, not just here in San Diego, because we know San Diego has rebounded pretty substantially. Many first-time buyers are still shut out of the market just because the overall wealth is about 40% lower than it was before the recession back in 2008. So the housing recovery needs to pick up, or it could potentially threaten the whole economy, as it's been proven that housing leads in any economic rebound. And it started to, but that was more investor-driven. Now, as we're waiting for the general public to get into the housing market, it's still very expensive, especially here in Southern California. And if rates were to move up, that's going to make it even less affordable for the general population. Next topic of news is our auto industry is booming. It is true, auto sales have been much stronger than many analysts have expected, and they're actually at close to peak levels from right before the recession. Part of that, of course, is cars don't have an infinite lifespan. They do have depending on the home or the car, I know it varies from car to car. You always hear about Toyotas. You can drive those for 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 miles. That can be a lot of years, but they are a necessary replaceable item, and so that's driving part of it. And then also there are generous credit and low interest rates, so there are a lot of opportunities where dealers are financing. But again, that is a good point because people are willing to go out and purchase a new car. Then here's one of the bigger ones. There are families with health insurance who didn't have it before. Absolutely, that's true. The early surveys show the Affordable Care Act is fulfilling its goal of expanding health insurance to several million additional people. And then the challenge remains going forward is whether or not the Obamacare will do anything to reduce medical costs and help the nation deal with unexpected explosion in healthcare spending as our baby boomer population retires. Next point, for the first time in nearly 20 years, we produce more oil here at home than we buy from abroad. This is one that we've talked about it many times. The president gets credit or gets the blame when things happen. This is one where our current president is taking full credit for the big energy boom. The reality is it's the new technology. It's the hydrofracking that's responsible for us producing more oil. It has nothing. Our president has done virtually nothing in terms of policy to help our oil production. And then by almost every measure, we are better off now than we were when I took office. Almost is the key word here. Median household income, adjusted for inflation, is still about 5% lower than it was the start of 2009. Since there are more jobs now, that means a lot of people are earning less than before the recession, which clearly puts a strain on household finances, which could still be the case when our current president leaves office in 2017. But it is nice. There are some positive outlooks that we're seeing, so that we're going in the right direction. Well, when we come back, we will have Jared Kaza with us, and we will discuss why you want to put it in writing, and then cases where it can possibly be a mistake to put certain things in writing. Stick around. You are listening to Your Lunch Hour, Mr. Credit, ESPN 1700.
Welcome back to the Lunch Hour with Mr. Credit. And today, it's Turnaround Tuesday on ESPN Radio 1700.
Welcome back. It is Your Lunch Hour, where we guarantee to make you smarter than everyone else. My name is Dan Osgood, sitting in studio for Mr. Credit. On the line, I have Mr. Jared Kaza with Neil Dimott downtown, estate planning attorney to our star of this show, Mr. Credit. Are you there, Jared?
Yes, sir. How are you today?
Good. Glad you could join us. I know you're keeping very busy downtown, and we're very grateful you can join us for the time we get you.
Oh, excellent. Thanks for filling some time for me.
Yep. We always discuss, Jared is step 3 in the life plan, and that is put it in writing. That is one of the key pieces to implement when it comes to making sure your financial house is in order. After you go through the fact gathering and figure out where you are and where you want to go, you want to make sure as you're going on that road, on that path to financial peace of mind, that you put it in writing and you make sure if something were to happen along the way, what you want to happen will happen if you are no longer here. Jared, I think I sent you a copy of a poem that I read, and it was kind of interesting to see the result here. And this could be a case where putting it in writing may have backfired in this case.
Okay.
It was a poem written by Jennifer Corner recently, and it became the subject of contentious litigation between her and Kent Nielsen, her live-in boyfriend. Apparently, Corner adopted a dog named The Stig, and on Christmas Day, Corner wrote a poem in which she expressed her intent to give The Stig to Nielsen, who was the boyfriend. Of course, relationship went the wrong direction, so once Corner and Nielsen ended their relationship, Nielsen took The Stig with him. Corner pleaded for Nielsen to bring Stig home, but Nielsen refused. There was a bench trial. The judge found Corner gifted the Stig to Nielsen by way of the poem, and Nielsen was the Stig's rightful owner. This case got appealed, and the court affirmed the judgment was correct, and Corner had made a valid inter vivos gift of the Stig to Nielsen. Any comments on that?
Well, I mean, what it is what they're saying there by the court is that it was a valid inter vivos gift. That's a fancy way of saying she gifted the dog to her boyfriend. It was a voluntary gift made during your lifetime. Basically, it says you put it in writing. It's a contract. We do IOUs. Those are still good. If you execute an IOU to someone, they can call you on it and take you to court. There are remedies available. I'm not sure what state this is in. I find it interesting that it went all the way to the Cook County Court. Actually, this is in Illinois, it looks like. Mm-hmm. So, but she made something in writing and gave it to her boyfriend, and he said this is the letter of the law. So that's an example of where putting it in writing works.
Right.
Just make sure that you're clear that what you write down is what you truly intend.
Correct. And with that, I want to get to there's a list here. We go through a lot of lists. The 10 biggest estate planning mistakes people can make. I think it covers a lot of this really well, and is just another way to really emphasize how the hows and whys you want to utilize your services. First one, biggest, and I see this in financial planning as well. Typically, any financial matter, I think this is an issue, and that is procrastination.
Yeah, that's a big problem. I mean, a lot of people, young people, old people all together, they don't either want to contemplate death or they don't want to. It does take time, let's be honest, to sit down and analyze all your assets, get all your ducks in a row. And sometimes we just, in our age, we're instant gratification. We have so many things going on. We just don't have the time in the day to sit down and do this. But it has to be done sooner rather than later because you can use a small amount of money and a small amount of time up front to set it up right, put it in writing, speak to your financial planner, speak to the attorney who they do this for a living, so they know the ins and outs, and it'll be set up so that way when potential problems occur in the future, you won't have to worry about them because you've already taken care of everything ahead of time. You've planned. You're not reacting to the situation.
Correct. And it's one of those things you just have to ask yourself, how important is it to you that you know what will happen? And if that is pretty high up on your list of importance, then you need to get off the couch and get this accomplished as soon as possible.
Definitely.
Item number 2, the do-it-yourself mentality. I agree that this could be admirable for some things, but when it comes to legal documents, this is not changing a sprinkler head in your yard. This is not where you can just go to Ace Hardware, buy a couple pieces, take something apart, put a new one on, and be done. There are too many ways you can make a small error which impacts the entire package.
Exactly. And I'm a huge do-it-yourself for myself. I think that if you can do it yourself, that's great. The problem we have with estate planning do-it-yourself is, one, there's a special skill that you don't have the background in drafting the contracts. You could make an error. You wouldn't know if you made the error. It's a big problem. And if you don't know you've made the error, well, when do we find out about the error? Well, that's after someone's passed away. And after someone's passed away, there's no real easy way to correct that error because the person has passed on. So then you have to go to court and do all kinds of stuff to try to remediate a simple error. So again, just because for that reason alone, I think that do-it-yourself here is running a risk of potential problems in the future for that reason.
And that leads perfectly into point number 3 of failing to think from all angles. That is part of the expertise you bring to the table, is bringing up a situation that me as a normal everyday citizen trying to put together a document like that, there are definitely things I would overlook and not even.
Sure. It's just like me, if I was willing to repair the tile in my bathroom, I think, I could just cut this out, repair it, and do it that way. Well, I may not think of all the angles with, mold and seepage and everything else that could arise there, because that's not my background.
Right.
And those things can seem superficial in the initial stage, but could lead to horrific consequences later on. So in this case, you rely on the expert to do that work, and the same would apply here.
Right. And next point, divorce. Many times clients don't take into account that they might get divorced and what that could make the plans that you put together look like.
Sure, and that just it kind of goes, like you said, off the looking at all the angles.
Mm-hmm.
The attorney, and more times than not, is a neutral party or an objective outside viewer, and they're looking at it from outside looking in and sees more angles and the potential for divorce and other things that we don't necessarily consider when we come to the table to create an estate plan, especially for married individuals.
Right. Number 5, missing the fine print. This kind of goes, these last 3 points are all kind of tying together.
Yep, exactly. Again, that's just, the attorney is there and has the education, the background to make sure that everything's taken care of, even the smallest minuscule detail. And unless you have the background and the knowledge, there is great potential that something gets left behind.
Right, and that brings up the next one. And this is, I mean, we had a veterinary doctor in studio last week to discuss what that hospital does, and this is dead on. It's forgetting pets. That's got to be a fairly common thing. People maybe get a pet after they've drawn their documents, and it just doesn't get included.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, you have the pet there, and it's really what we're talking about here is taking care of the animal. You want to make sure that that's the person that the owner wants to take care of their pets if something happened to them be clearly stated in the document. So you ensure that you have say over how your animals can be treated. You know your friends, your family members, who's going to be the one that's going to take care of your pet best. So why not just add that in writing? And if you're worried about the financial consequences, you can always create a pet trust or some other account set up for the benefit of the animal during its life. So that way you're not putting a financial burden on your step parent, if you would, for your animal, to take care of them in your way. So again, the more you can include in the document, whether in the trust or what I'd recommend, but whatever document you do create that provides clear instruction, the better.
Right. The next point, failing to update all documents. We talk about this all the time. Just a periodic review to make sure the people you've listed are still around, or they're still the people you want to end up with something or control something.
Yep, exactly right. And frankly, your concerns and your desires at, say, age 25 are drastically different than at age 50, at least I would hope. Yeah. And because
some people never grow up.
Yeah, well, exactly. Because of that, you have to continually reassess your situation and adapt, because the world around you is adapting whether you like it or not. So you better do it as well.
Okay. Number 8, underestimating trusts. That misperception is that trusts are only for minor children.
Yeah, that or really rich old people in England. But either way, it's true. It's just a misconception of what a trust means now. A trust is very flexible and something that should be used by everyone, especially if you own your home, as a good way to avoid probate, if nothing else, to ensure that the transfer of your assets after your death or after divorce or some other event is done seamlessly, privately, and without the fees and entanglements that the California judicial system has for its citizens.
Okay, number 9, failing to consider digital assets. We've talked about this now a couple times. It's becoming a much bigger issue. Websites, web domains.
Exactly. Again, it deals a lot with third parties. They want to ensure that they have a duty to protect certain information, make it keep it private. That's a big hot topic nowadays. And what they are looking for is clear instructions or documentation from the owner of the digital assets that says who has access to this information. If that person's gone, was the trustee make specific reference that his wife, your brother-in-law, whoever has access to that information, so that they feel confident, to relay that information. And if you don't do that, it could create a lot of hiccups. And
the last point, which I think this would be a tough one to really track, is currently there's no passing on of digital libraries and music collections just due to the specific rules of digital content. But
yeah, I think that's right. It's something that, again, is company specific and arguably industry specific. That'll be
I'm sure that gets addressed at some point in the future, but I have a hard time believing if you leave your personal computer to someone and it has all your digital media on it, that anyone's going to go and say, well, gee, that was only purchased by this person, so you have to delete it all.
No, I don't think that's what we're talking about here. I know like Amazon, or I think it's Amazon, I know that you can like buy movies or whatever, but you have to log in to use them, so you don't actually download the product, you just access it. Maybe that's what we're talking about. I don't know, but I'm with you. If you download it and you put it on a backup hard drive, back up your files like you want to, then you should be fine. But, this is just another technology will dictate as the years go by.
Okay. Well, that is Jared Kaza with Neil Dimott Downtown, estate planning attorney. If you have any estate planning questions or needs, I really believe you should go set an appointment with Jared, get your free consultation. You can contact him 619-238-1712. Once again, 619-238-1712. Jared's going to stick around for the next segment, and we will discuss women out there. Pay attention. We're going to talk about some of the important estate planning tips as a woman you need to address.
Welcome back to the Lunch Hour with Mr. Credit. And today, it's Turnaround Tuesday on ESPN Radio 1700.
Welcome back. It is your lunch hour, where we are guaranteeing to make you smarter than anyone else. I'm Dan Osgood, sitting in for Mr. Credit. I have on the line with me Jared Kaza with Neil Dimott Downtown, bringing his estate planning expertise to the microphones. And I always forget this. If for any reason you care to see me sitting here in the studio by myself, you can go to mrcredit.tv and see me sweating here in front of this mic. But Jared, we talked about this a few weeks back and some challenges just due to the natural factor that women on average live about 6 years longer than men, and how that can kind of create challenges when it comes to the estate planning documents being drawn up and then different issues. But there's other facts here. Basically, according to U.S. Trust, 52% of women came into their marriage or relationship with financial assets equal to or greater than their spouse or partner, and 1/3, so 33% of those women, are now the primary income earner or contribute equally to the household wealth. Pretty substantial. But just on the surface, any particular issues that you see that you do maybe slightly differently for women?
In a way, you hit some very important points there in the intro, and two of which that come to mind are, one, the simple fact that statistics show that the women typically live longer than men. So when you're talking about a marital unit with a man and a woman, for the woman, you typically have to plan for her outliving her husband and managing wealth for her needs after the husband has passed away. And it calls into question a couple of things. The merger of two estates, because you still have separate property assets from the husband to consider, whether those get passed on to the children directly or to the surviving spouse. It creates potential tax issues there, is one thing. And the second issue is something that Derek likes to talk about a lot on this show, is the planning for longevity, whether it's long-term care insurance and the rising cost of the medical expenses to be incurred by someone who lives into advanced age. That's something to plan for and can be addressed as part of the estate plan as well as part of the financial plan, which I'm sure that you deal with a lot as well.
Right. And I know, like durable power of attorney, long-term care, you touched on the long-term care aspect. If they're going to live longer, the likelihood that they're going to have some debilitating issue comes up, so that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, exactly. And again, because we're talking about caring for ladies and what have you, durable power of attorney is great because it gives the individual the ability to basically handpick the person is going to be making their decisions for them, whether it's a next of kin, mother, father, you name it, child.
Good friend that's a doctor.
Exactly. And if we establish that clearly and conclusively, then it reduces the chance that we're going to have to go to the court to petition for like a conservatorship or something to that effect as well, which could arise, especially when there's not a lot of funding to help pay for the individual's care.
Okay, and then as far as like the assets go, because the female tends to live longer, if the husband dies, that probably creates an issue where they want to address that in a fairly timely manner.
It does. Again, I think the primary area where I see it is the merger of the estates. When the husband's assets are transferred to the wife, and the wife now has a lot of additional assets to her name, whether it's selling the personal residence later in life, whether to consider whether or not we want to deal with a reverse mortgage. A lot of financial decisions are now being, exponentially increased for the surviving spouse, and in this case, we're talking about the female, and that has to be addressed as part of the estate plan, and that's a long-term planning when you're talking about creating a trust for a young married couple. But it is something that has to be considered, and more appropriately, we'd probably address that as part of one of our updates. That's why we always say to keep updating your plan as you get older and everything else.
Right. And kind of going off of the 10 points from the previous discussion, similar to the possibility of divorce, once she becomes a widow and has all these assets, you probably in that would take steps to make sure that if they had kids, that if she decided she wanted to get remarried, she meets someone down the road, doesn't like being alone, wants to get remarried, that those assets are protected for the benefit of their kids, and that if suddenly she passed on and the new spouse survives, that he isn't able to come in and just pilfer all the assets.
Sure. We call that an ABC trust. And basically what that does is it creates 3 separate trusts upon the death of the first spouse. The first trust created is a survivor's trust, which would be filled with the surviving spouse's assets and part of the community property. The B trust would be what we call a bypass trust. And typically in that trust is an irrevocable trust, and it's set up for the benefit of the children of the marriage, ultimately. However, that we do create it in such a way that the surviving spouse can draw income from that trust. And then there is a C trust, which is set up similar to the bypass trust, but it does have a little bit different provisions with respect to the surviving spouse's rights to those assets. And again, that's more for a tax purposes as well. So that's when I start calling my accountants on the phone and setting up the provisions for those type of trusts. But yes, that is a very common scenario that we deal with when we're creating trust.
And also in this situation, if the female spouse survives, the importance that we talk about all the time of go back and update the beneficiary forms.
Yes. Exactly right. Update the beneficiary form because, odds are that you've named your predeceased spouse as the primary beneficiary, and unless the trust is named as a backup, which we always recommend, your named beneficiary is no longer living, so it could those assets could potentially be ceded to your estate. And again, we talk about this in the show a lot. The estate is governed by the will, it's governed by the court system, and may incur some substantial tax penalties.
Right. We want to protect that. Well, let's have some fun here now from wealthmanagement.com.
All right.
Lessons of the rich and famous in death. We talk about this all the time just because celebrities, when there is an unfortunate case where someone passes, when they haven't done their documents properly, we get to find out everything they hadn't
exactly
did not. So a couple examples here. This was kind of interesting. One would think if you were powerful enough and you ran our country, like say a president, that you would be able to have your personal details in order.
Who would think that?
Nowadays I'd probably think it even less, but it's not the case. President Lincoln, Johnson, Garfield, and Grant all did not do a good job and created headaches. In fact, it's been well documented that President Lincoln, who was a practicing attorney, left a final estate that was in such disarray it took more than 2 years to settle.
Well, if there's ever a test study or something to look at. I mean, Lincoln obviously was very busy with other things at the time.
Yeah, he had a few things
I would
going on.
imagine as to drafting his plans. But again, he could have been in the pool of people that say, look, I'll take care of it later in life. And, well, we all know how his life ended.
Correct.
So, again, it shows you that, the unexpected can happen, so the best thing to do is be proactive about it.
Right. The next one, the Spruce Goose, Howard Hughes, the famous business magnate, aviator, philanthropist, and later in life a recluse.
Yep.
He was deemed to have died intestate. Intestate? How do you?
Yeah, intestate means he doesn't have a will, trust anything.
So, and then they found a handwritten will on the desk of a church official and determined that was forged. But one of the richest people in the world, $2.5 billion estate, was eventually split among 22 cousins.
Oh, that would have been an interesting case to work on for sure.
And it said not before much grousing and litigation.
Yep.
And here's the interesting part. In fact, even though Hughes died in 1976, his estate wasn't finally settled and closed until 2010.
Well, I mean, that's
34 years.
Not. I mean, when you're talking about $2.5 billion and you're talking about 22 cousins, unfortunately, a lot of people see that as free money, and, the estate will pay for it and to figure out how it gets split up.
You have relatives and cousins you didn't know existed just lining up.
Exactly.
When you have that much.
If he had done a trust, Mr. Hughes, then it wouldn't have been published. It would have been clearly worded, and it could have been taken care of very quickly and easily. Well, maybe not quickly. I mean, we're talking about Howard Hughes here and his estate, but at least however he wanted it. But I can't really speak to his state of mind at the end of his life. So
no,
I'm not sure that
he
would have
definitely was pretty well documented as not being entirely there. But
sure.
Well, Jared, thank you very much. Once again, that is Jared Kaza. Estate planning issues, questions, call him for a free consultation. He'll sit down and really set you straight and make you smarter than everyone else when it comes to estate planning. You can contact him 619-238-1712. Jared, enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, sir. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks again. You are listening to Your Lunch Hour, ESPN 1700 Mr. Credit, where we guarantee to make you smarter than everyone else.
Welcome back to the Lunch Hour with Mr. Credit. And today, it's Turnaround Tuesday on ESPN Radio 1700.
Well, I think we have officially turned around, and we are now pointing towards Wednesday. It is Your Lunch Hour, Mr. Credit, where we are guaranteeing to make you smarter than everyone else. Thanks again to Jared Kaza for joining me via the telephone, as he is quite busy working on many plans for people. An interesting piece of information I just saw, and this is actually nice, and I think it's very important for the middle class. This is a group that seems to be getting slowly carved out of the equation when it comes to just families in general here in the United States. The challenge is affording college, where people think, well, gee, if you're in the middle class, you make, say, $100,000. If that, I believe that's right, kind of in the middle of that middle class benchmark, which is twice the median household income. That is becoming a more challenging place to be able to afford college. And one of the main reasons is the people make too much money typically, so you don't qualify for government financial aid in any manner, like federal grants, things like that. Basically, when middle income families can't afford college tuition, they basically are increasingly leaning on debt. And there was a recent study that found college students from middle-income families were more likely to end up with student debt than those from lower and higher income backgrounds. And we all know about the student debt problem that is here, that exists now. So obviously it's that middle class. Again, it's a challenge for people in the middle class to get out of problems, and you want to get ahead. You want to go to the college, get the higher education. That it's proven that is the stepping stone to creating a better life in the future. But there is a potential solution here. There is one state, and this could be a shock to people. It is California. This fall, California will become the first state to dole out scholarships specifically aiming to help middle-income families. It's going to be called the California Middle Class Scholarship, and it's going to offer funding to families who earn less than $150,000 a year, and that's including investment income and other assets. That's if their child enrolls at a UC school, so University of California, or a California State University. We have each of those here in San Diego. We have UCSD, we have Cal State San Marcos, we have San Diego State. The awards with this program, they max out at about 40% of the cost of tuition, and they will vary based on the number of families that apply to try to receive this. And important to pay attention to, in order to be eligible, if you fit into that category, you make less than $150,000, I recommend you look this up. Fill out the free federal application for financial aid between January 2nd and March 2nd of 2015. That will put you in line to potentially get some of these awards of financial aid to help reduce the burden of paying for that higher education. One of the common problems with people in that middle range is if you have 2, 3, 4 kids, that's a much bigger expense than if you just have one, and that tends to be one of the problems, the challenges. And the good news with this is if you can qualify and receive this financial aid, it allows the student to spend more time and devote more effort on the studies, on the school, on the education, rather than trying to worry about how am I going to pay it off or trying to take on a job and not be able to focus as much on the studies. So they're going to be much better off down the road. So a very, I guess, a high five to California, or just a big bravo. That looks like a very nice program, and whoever is behind it, I give them high praise. Next thing, a question I get with some regularity as a financial planner is, what do you do after your 401k and your IRA are maxed out? Are there other ways to save money? And if so, beyond just putting it in a savings account, are there tax-efficient ways to accomplish this? If you are one of these rare people that is in that situation where you are maxing your 401k out and your IRA is maxed out each year, and you would like to save even more, there are a number of tax-efficient investment options that you can utilize. One that's becoming more and more popular these days, a health savings account, or an HSA, you may have heard of. This is an option that's available for people with high deductible health insurance policies. When you have one of these high deductible plans, you can put pre-tax dollars into this HSA or health savings account. The account's designed to help you pay the high deductibles of your insurance. Other features of the HSA that makes them a good vehicle for retirement savings, very different from a flexible spending account, an FSA. It is not, the HSA is not use it or lose it. So if you put money in this year, you don't use it all, that money actually carries over to the next year. Where with the FSA, if that money's not used, it's gone. You don't get to keep it any longer. There are some caveats here. If the money is withdrawn for qualified medical expenses, it's totally tax-free. If you do need that money for other purposes, it can be subject to income tax and possibly a penalty. However, if you reach age 65, you can withdraw that money penalty-free for any purpose. So it can be a vehicle that you can just pile money into up to the limits. It's not an unlimited savings account, but it can be something you can use that can be very efficient in order to give you some more potential tax-free growth. Next one, a deferred variable annuity. There's people on both sides of the fence when it comes to annuities. They are expensive, but they do serve a purpose. They are a nice way to provide income for retirement purposes. They do fall into the category of guaranteed income source for retirement, and that money, as long as it's in that account, grows tax deferred, much like a 401k. The other is just a regular taxable account, and then just purchase tax-efficient investments, such as municipal bonds. There are ETFs you can buy that, as long as you don't sell them, you are not creating a tax liability. So you could buy some index funds, ETFs, like SPDRs, and be able to control the tax implications of those investments. So there are ways. I would recommend you sit with a professional and look at all your options if you're looking to do this. But just know there are other options besides just maxing out the 401k, maxing out an IRA, and that's it. That's all you can save. There are ways you can do it, and do it in a very tax-efficient manner. Well, that just about does it today. Like I said, we have turned the corner here on Tuesday. We're pointing towards Wednesday. You have been listening to Your Lunch Hour, Mr. Credit, where we guarantee to make you smarter than everyone else. Everyone get out. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll talk to you next week.
If you would like to contact Mr. Credit or access any free offers mentioned on the show, just go to mrcredit.org. That's mrcredit.org.